Hey everybody, this is Tyler Bell, your friend, host of the Westside Fairytales. It's June 2020, and this is the Westside Fairytales Horror and Lit Club episode where we're going to be talking about Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and Pan's Labyrinth, directed by Guillermo del Toro. These are two books that I picked well before this month. And these months, it's one of those things where like I didn't intend for these things to be very on point, so to say, with the things that are occurring in the world right now. I could have said the same thing about some of the last few ones. I don't intend to be a topical writer. I don't really feel like that kind of creator. I don't have the ability really to sit down and start writing fiction based on stuff that I see outside. That might not make any sense because I know I say and I am inspired by the things that are going on around me at any given time, but I can't do the Law and Order version of writing. If you're not familiar with the television show Law and Order and its various permutations, they always manage to be oddly topical while also completely missing the point. It's a lot of like fear-based what's going on right now in the media thing. SVU, sorry, is more gratuitous with this, but you can often see like whoever the flavor of the month is for criminal activity or for some sort of potentially dangerous, middle white class America frightening type thing that's going on, that'll show up. I remember when Anita Sarkeesian, who you probably don't know and don't bother looking her up, she's this person that's involved in video game criticisms and stuff, and that whole place is just a minefield of bad actors and people that don't know how to make points about things that they don't understand on both sides. But she got death threats, which is not good. And they made an episode, I think it was of SVU, where there were gamers threatening these gamer girls. And I've seen chunks of the episode, and it's the most hilariously cringe, unresearched, thumb so far off the pulse of understanding the issues at hand that it's hilarious. It paints a very bad picture of guys that play games, but even people that are like on the opposite side of that conversation would be like, that's not really the point we were trying to make about misogyny in the video game world. Thank you for thinking of us, but this doesn't really help anybody. One of those sorts of things, which I find funny as hell. But I can't write like that. Not because it's particularly bad. There's other people that write, and it's they do that same sort of creation, and it's very good. I can't really think of any examples offhand, but I assure you they exist. I'm not being facetious, but I just can't do it because it's a little forced for me, and anything even slightly forced, I just can't. I can't. I've tried, and it slips over my head. If I start writing about things that are going on right around me, I just want to slip right into nonfiction and just start doing it journalistically, because otherwise I get afraid of making mistakes in real time, which I think is what you should really be afraid of in those circumstances. It's easy for me to write about something that's already happened. You know what I mean? Because you have the benefit of 2020 vision, and then looking at that, you can sort of create a narrative around, hey, these are the mistakes that they made, and this is the result that occurred, and then, relate that into the future somehow and all that sort of stuff. But really, when things are happening in real time, you can never be 100% sure that you know exactly what you're talking about. Even if you believe 100% in something and you're going to support it no matter what, there's always a chance that, you're making a mistake or this or that. And if you're going to make one of those mistakes, make that mistake in a nonfiction context. You know what I mean? Because then you're at least hampered by the facts that you know And you can go back and say, like, I didn't know those facts, as opposed to say, like, well, I didn't mean to create this gigantic overarching narrative in which this thing that was mildly misunderstood was actually portrayed as extraordinarily evil, which, again, not something I can come up with an effective example for offhand, but I know if those of you out there that read and write a lot and watch TV and movies and are real consumers of fiction, you know examples of the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. But no, I don't quite digress. I guess in the case of this month's selections, I think it's just Maya Angelou's work continues and will probably continue being relevant and timely even long after the civil rights debate and movement in America. That's the very much, black people and white people and our strained and odd and oftentimes gross relationship for the past several hundred years. Once that's, if not, I don't even want to say it like while I'm talking about it, like it's going to be something that's like in the past, because, that could happen hilariously within a year, although that's obviously not going to fucking happen, or even something like 20 or 30 years, but could be something that's going to continue going on for 100, 200 years. But like, I want to explain that timeline before I say, even after that sort of conversation has resolved itself and is done, I think, if we still live in a world where people can talk about things, you'll still understand injustice and stuff through a lens, or you'll be able to understand injustice and a lot of different types of suffering and strength and overcoming through a lens that's as powerful as Maya Angelou's. That's my ultimate point. And there's parts of that story that are effective for other conversations that aren't even quite a part of the one that's happening right now. A lot of things about women's rights and how children are raised and all sorts of stuff. I feel like when it comes time a little bit later in this program to talk about why the caged bird sings, I'm not going to talk about it narratively, because there are a lot of people who have done that way better than me, and I don't want to embarrass myself, functionally speaking. I'm kind of afraid of digging into why the caged bird sings from anything more than a very surface level, but we'll get to that. I'm interested in talking about some stuff I've seen recently, and that'll get me very upset. And then I'll start talking about the actual recommendation. So things that I have been watching recently. I've been watching, as I know a few of you out there enjoy the Joe Bob Briggs show, The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, which is amazing. You should absolutely check it out. If you have any interest in the creation of and the history of horror movies and their relevant connections to the greater world of cinema, absolutely go check out Joe Bob Briggs. Unfortunately, I watched the movie Cannibal Holocaust, which was part of one of his recent episodes. I don't blame him for putting it on. I think it's important that something like that, I know it's like the weird argument, but it's important that something like that exists, because it is the base level to which no other thing should descend from. Like, if you are at or below the level of just unacceptableness as Cannibal Holocaust, your movie should not exist. Cannibal Holocaust should be the only one, and anything that's within a range around it should just get firebombed out of existence. If you're not familiar with Cannibal Holocaust, it is a narrative within a narrative, which I never thought it would have that complex of a storytelling device, but it does. Even looking back on the film, I'm surprised that it is a narrative within a narrative. Within a narrative, actually, it's It's actually a 3-layered story now that I remember. The primary layer is and I'm not even going to bother clicking on the fucking Wikipedia article or doing any research into the names and the dates and stuff about this, because there is a potential of me running into things about the movie that disgusted me, and I don't want to do that. But basically, there's a guy who is a documentarian, and he's selling a TV show or a movie, something like that, some sort of film media property to these suits somewhere in New York City. And he's talking to them and telling them, like, hey, the footage that I found is really fucked up, and no one should, it's probably not something that you guys should watch. But I found it and I brought it back because you paid me to do that, and I did. And so inside that story of him talking to them is his actual story of going and finding the footage, which it's odd to think, but it is well done as far as a narrative construction. It's actually very interesting of a story where he goes back and he retraces the steps of these 4 hippies, basically, that went out into the Colombian wilderness ahead of him and tried to make their own documentary. And these people were well-known documentarians who mostly filmed like fucked up stuff, like war crimes and things. The one example is given of their previous work, which is a film in which I believe they're Africans, are involved in some sort of wartime atrocity, and they are executing civilians. The note of that part of the movie is that in the fictional universe of the movie, that is film footage that was faked in order to make it all look worse than it was, and so that they could sell it and say, like, there's this conflict going on, and the conflict's not really happening, which is journalistically horrific on so many levels. Like, if I can take an aside right there, the thought of somebody creating a conflict, especially an international conflict like that when there exists none, is so fucking scary. Because it's so easy to do. It would make sense, back in the day to false flag the existence of an atrocity through a fake documentary. It's scary to me because I would not be surprised if it was actually done. I haven't done research. There's probably some evidence that somebody faked a war between 2 people in order to do something political in the region, but I digress. It's kind of presented in the similar vein as like the Rwandan genocide, right? The real life version of that is that this is found footage in real life. It's repurposed nonfiction footage of actual war crimes. And I knew it. I knew what I was looking at because I know what people look like when they get shot. Immediately, I was like, oh, okay, that's actually people getting shot. Because in real life, getting shot does not look like it does in the movies. It's not particularly gruesome, actually, or gory. It's not extreme. There's not big blood splatters popping out. It usually looks like nothing happened at all, and someone doubles up, and there's spasms and stuff. And I won't get into it, but I was like, oh shit, that person actually got shot. That's what a gunshot looks like. And then, it's not a short scene either. So I was like, I don't want to be watching this because I know what this is. And then it's like later presented as being fake. And I'm like, I'm so confused. And this is early in the narrative. I think this is within the first like 20 or 30 minutes. That's bad. What the movie does good is actually one of my favorite types of storytelling conventions, which is the retracing the steps and finding the artifacts of the lost voyage kind of deal. It's a great storytelling device that's not used exceptionally often. I don't know if it's just other people don't enjoy it very much, but I love it. I think I've seen it in a lot of other stories where it's not done well. Most notably, the 2000s era remake of The Thing, the quote unquote The Thing prequel, which is one of the most abysmal disappointments of a film ever. Maybe one day I'll rewatch that and do like a review or something on it, but I wouldn't want to talk about it at length in this. But basically, you go around and you find stuff and you're like, oh shit, what could this mean? And it's the Jeopardy version. It's in the Jeopardy inversion, you give the answer and then you've got to find the question, which I really like because it puts your brain in action. Because if you take somebody to the end of the action, you say, this is the result, their brain will do so much more work than if you tell them like, this is the potential of what's going to happen from the other side. Two guys walk into a room with knives. You're like, oh, okay, well, maybe they'll fight each other or maybe there's something that they're going to cut up in there or blah, 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 blah. But one guy walks out of a room missing a hand. His shirt is covered in blood and torn, and he just like slides down the wall. You're like, oh, okay, this is what happened here. I need to work back through the investigation. I think because of how powerful of a storytelling technique that is, for some reason people just don't do it enough. It's the same thing that is almost always employed in good true crime. You start with the investigation, the aftermath, the walkthrough, the talking about the body, and then you've got to go back through and find out what's really happening. That's I think why that's so good. But it doesn't work for a lot of different types of narratives. You couldn't really do it with a lot of like superhero films. Obviously, you couldn't do it with a romance almost at all. You could if you were extremely good, but I don't think that a lot of romance authors are going to try to start out with, they got together, here's how. It would be difficult, and you'd have to do a lot of extremely interesting things that I think are a little just, they don't work with the romance genre, which is always supposed to be more in the comfy area of book creating, not the challenging area. But I digress. No disrespect to romance authors. Actual romance authors will know what I'm talking about. They have a very specific type of book that they write, to the point there's acronyms that go along with it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you stray too far outside of that, you're technically not really even in the romance writers' conventions. So regardless, let's get back to the story at hand. So yeah, Cannibal Holocaust continues on this interesting thing, but the whole time it is just peppered and infested and infected and full of awful, horrific animal abuse. And when I first heard about this story, I heard about it in the context that there was like one animal was killed on screen for food. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so you put the butchery, the killing and the butchery of an animal by someone who does that on film, which, would disturb a lot of people. People don't want to know where that kind of food comes from. So a lot of people who are vegetarians and vegans know where that food comes from, and they don't appreciate it and don't want to eat it anymore because of that. But even from a strictly creative standpoint, I was like, okay, so you could put that relatively banal thing inside a film to really spice up how intense it is. It's not something I would ever do, because I would never. The good thing about fiction is no one has to get hurt. That's the best thing about it. No matter what happens, I can write the most fucked up, insane shit, and that the only person that really got hurt during the creation of it is me. Like the pain and stuff that you see in my writing is all mine, that I'm sharing with you, but I didn't have to hurt anyone else. I didn't have to inconvenience a single person to get to the end of that story, especially an animal. In this film, I will not go into details, but there's at least 4 animals that are killed on screen, graphically butchered in some respects, and not cleanly, and not by people who are clearly professionals. It is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Even me at my edgiest teen phase would have been repulsed by this. And I think that's the only kind of people I can see this appealing to are the extraordinarily depraved. Extraordinarily depraved. And maybe that subsection of teenage boys who are trying to show off how strong they are inside by letting their friends know the extent of the horrible shit that they can be exposed to without flinching, which is not a good thing necessarily. It's an inherent and incumbent part of young boys' lives. Growing up as a teenager, I can tell you that it was a very strong part of mine. Looking up stuff like, I was early internet in the 2000s. Early 2000s is when I was really a teenager. And so, we had beheading videos and the old Faces of Death stuff. And you would try to watch, have you seen this fucked up thing? But there was also always an understanding that, at least to me, that we were not supposed to be doing that. And that what we were seeing was wrong fundamentally. But I think a movie like this might open the doors for somebody who doesn't think that that's wrong to watch it. And I mean, on top of this, there are just gross things that are put on screen. There's graphic rape, pretty graphic. I mean, it's not an XC-17. I don't think it's an XC-17 film. I don't think it is. But, you don't see a lot of sex organs, basically. But women are brutalized. Women are sexually assaulted. They're beaten. They are hurt. Violence against women in this is almost to a flat, if not at a flat 10. Violence against men is right up there. Violence against Aboriginal, Native people solely for the fact that they are Aboriginal and Native people is at a 10. And then when you find out the filming, things that happened in the filming where they were being told to stay literally inside of smoke-filled burning buildings so that the director could get the shot of them running out one by one, stretched out as long as possible. That's an 11. It is, I've heard the term exploitation film, as many people have throughout their lives. And you have your own view of it. In my opinion, there are some exploitation films that are called exploitation films that I think are actually better for the people that are being exploited, quote unquote, than they are for the people who are supposed to be enjoying the exploitation. You know what I mean? It was kind of subverted, like, hey, we're going to have you do this and this. And wasn't that crazy? And those people are like, oh yeah, that's insane. Would be weird to see guys kissing on film, or it would be weird to see women having like a healthy female relationship. But this is not that. There is no redeeming quality of this film, save the ones you have to think of indirectly. To the point where I have never in my fucking life actually been fully tested on the, is there something that you think that is a created work, a piece of medium that shouldn't exist or should be censored or something? And I still don't think this film should be censored, quote unquote. I think it shouldn't fucking exist. I think, and I have to say, the one reason that it's good that it exists is that no one else will try to make it, because every time somebody brings up that this film is around, they're going to get smacked down. I think that the rights to it, the rights to reprinting it, should all be somehow gathered up and made into a way that this is only ever visible for free places, and that any money that's raised from it, and that maybe even it should have to be gone back and people should be retroactively charged for selling copies of this piece of shit. All of that cash should have to go to the indigenous people in that area and animal rights groups. The only thing I can say that the violence against the human beings in it is not as bad to me as the violence against the animals. Is that I understand that all the human beings survived. Mistreated, exploited, just shit on completely. And there's more to say about that I'll get into, and I'm not going to say what happens to some of these animals, but you can use your imagination. As bad as you think it's going to be, it's worse. It's stuff that you've heard, the things that I've written and that I've been a part of, the Monstro stuff. This actually sickened me to the point that I was grinding my fucking teeth while I was watching it. And I hate saying this stuff out loud because in my head, I'm like, you said my brain is going back to my old Marine Corps days and like, you sound like a fucking pussy, dude. You sound fucking weak. But no, dude, I have never been pissed while I was watching a film. I could not imagine some guys sitting around going, oh, wow, that's crazy. Wow, man, that's wild. You know, like you do when you watch like the most mentally debased, brainless slasher film, and you're like, oh man, that kill was off the hook. Or like, oh, look, this stupid bitch is gonna go in the fucking room. Ah, she took an axe to the face. Haha. Wow, that's crazy. I'm all about that feeling. Anybody that would watch Cannibal Holocaust and feel that, I have to say, you're definitely in a certain class of people that maybe shouldn't be around or allowed around other people. Maybe you should seek some help. If you're getting help, maybe you should just mention the feelings that you feel when you watch this film to your therapist or your significant other or anyone that you know, and process that. Fucking Cannibal Holocaust. I've been waiting to talk about that until I got here, just because I needed to get that out. And obviously, me and Sam were of a mind. My fiance, who watched the film with me, we were of a mind about it. All the people in the show and Joe Bob's last drive-in were clearly of a mind about it as well. There was no like, oh, you know, here's the defense. Even the descriptions of the director, Joe Bob was like, he makes some excuses for this film, but I've talked to people that were actually actors on the film. A lot of them didn't know what was going to happen or were too late to say anything, or like maybe I think even one of them was actually kind of a weird guy and like way too into doing stuff. But even they even try to present it as, you know, being at least some of the real versions of these tribes on film, and even that's not the case. There's one tribe that's actually on it. That's actually just them. They just went to these indigenous people, and they have a very specific look. They have these like bowl cuts, you know, and their skin tone is this specific skin tone, and they all kind of look like a people. You know, they have a cultural genetic heritage that you can see. But apparently there was other people that were indigenous in the area, and he just made them dress like these indigenous people, even though they had their own culture and stuff, because he wanted to keep a uniform. So there's that. There's that bit of like, Jesus fucking Christ, dude, added on top of it. I should say that he's Italian, so at least, you know, I don't have to claim him as an American. He was an Italian filmmaker. So there's that. I don't know what that is. It's just me trying to not have to take responsibility to a degree for his horse shit. But I guess really the thing is no matter what kind of indigenous person you are, even if it's late into the 1900s, you can still be exploited by a fucking white European guy. You're not safe. And fuck if it's not all just on point with what's going on right now this June. I've watched a lot of other good stuff. It's just none of it really sticks in the craw as much as Cannibal fucking Holocaust. But yeah, I would say I might do a review or something. But if I ever did, just understand that it's for quality, a 0, for enjoyability, a 0, And for horror, a 5. Avoid it. Final grade. Jesus fucking Christ, that film. Let's talk about Maya Angelou. Like I said earlier, I'm not going to really get too much into the plot and the breakdown of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That book deserves to have college courses taught on it. A lot of times, because if you have somebody that is not a black person, a black woman, especially from the American South, getting into the context of what's happening chapter by chapter, just so that you know historically what happened, is important. It's one of those things where I read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings because I was like, why haven't I read this? I'm 30. I think I read it like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Why haven't I read this book yet? Anyway. Answers abound, obviously. But just getting into it, it's one of those things where you have to look up, like, what is all of it true? You know, is any of this just exceptional? And what you really get from it when you compare it against the historical subtext is that Angelou actually didn't waste too much time talking about shit that she already knew. You're like, oh, this seems really bad. You're like, oh no, look it up. It gets worse. It gets worse. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about Maya Angelou. She was obviously a writer, poet, civil rights activist. She was born in St. Louis, Missouri, April 4th, 1928, and died May 28th, 2014 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is Winston as in Winston cigarettes. She's out in tobacco country. She was active from 1951 to 2014. Her most notable work is, of course, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which was released in 1969 and the first best-selling novel by a African-American woman in history, I believe. Especially in America, but I think all over. I think all over it was the first bestseller. So, you know, even on the English charts and whatnot. So let's go back a little bit through her life. I'm just getting this real simple. This is just, footnotes, Wikipedia and stuff. She was born Marguerite Ann Johnson. She became a poet and writer after a series of occupations as a young adult, including fry cook, sex worker, nightclub dancer and performer, cast member of the opera Porgy and Bess, coordinator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and journalist in Egypt and Ghana during the decolonization of Africa. If that's not, if you can't even just pick up the context in that series of jobs that she had to do to become Maya Angelou, that is just profound. Like, the opportunities that were afforded to her were sex work and base restaurant jobs, which she was probably felt lucky to get at the time. You know what I mean? Because people weren't trying to hire black people to do fucking anything. And if you could hire a black guy or a black woman, you hired a dude because you're also probably a fucking sexist at the time. And she turned all of that into being a foreign correspondent during the decolonization of Africa, which that's just mind-blowing as far as an art goes. But really, she was probably always capable of becoming that person that she became at the end. Not really probably as in she might have had the talent. She always had the talent to do that. But given a different set of circumstances from her birth, she might not even wanted to do that. She might have been just comfortable being a local politician or a doctor or a lawyer. But that's what she turned an extremely powerful and supple brain that is just absorbent and good at pulling stuff in and clarifying and codifying and then returning that back into the world with such poetry and dedication to the written form that's absolutely exceptional. I digress. In 1982, she was named the first Reynolds Professor of American Studies at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She was active in the civil rights movement and worked with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Beginning in the 1990s, she made approximately 80 appearances a year on the lecture circuit, something she continued into her 80s. 1993, she recited her poem On the Pulse of Morning at the first inauguration of Bill Clinton, making her the first poet to make an inaugural recitation since Robert Frost at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy in 1961. Man, like, just wow. That's just exceptional. And I believe she wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings as a challenge, and I'll get into that as a bit too. But I don't feel like it's even appropriate to just sit here and gush over her. I don't feel like I'm adding much to the conversation, but she's just such an exceptional person, and it's odd that a lot of people haven't read the book. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was released, like I said, in 1969, and it is exceptionally easy to read. It is not a difficult book. I think it's one of those things, just like jazz music and blues that the Black community has given to American culture, where it's a perfect blend of exceptionally difficult things while also being very approachable. No, it's not hard to appreciate blues music. Once you start hearing it, you're like, damn, I feel that. I get that feeling. It's the same thing with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. You don't have to have a doctorate in English to get into it. It's not something that's like a lot of high school books, like the Scarlet Letter and stuff, where you're going to have to read along with like a thesaurus and stuff. You might have to read along with an accurate history book, but that's more of a statement about the state of American historic understanding of what we've gone through than Maya's ability to convey what she's going through and what she's thinking, what she's feeling. In that case, and honestly, you'll learn a lot anyway. And it's just like blues music. It's not easy to play. She does the work for you to make it simple and poetic and beautiful, so that you want to go from passage to passage, and your brain's just like, I'm about this. I'm feeling this. Like, I know what you're saying, and I know why you're taking me along on this ride. And that's the same thing with just like blues music, which is extremely important to me as a creator. It's blues and jazz, modal African-American music in those styles and with those understandings is very important to me as a creator, because it informs a lot of the way that I make stuff, in which you've got to layer things, and you've got to understand feeling and flow and modalities, which I won't really get into, but how different types of things will work together in a broad sense that will make people feel the way you're feeling. Blues is really, really fucking hard to play. The intro stuff is easy. And everyone that gets up to blues, if you have a basic sense of rhythm and a basic sense of melody, the basic blues run, then you get 16-bar blues and 8-bar blues and all that sort of stuff. But once you actually take the simplicity of that, those little rhythmic, melodic underpinnings, you can dance on top of it and create things of astounding complexity and difficulty. Bringing up a white guy in this case, but Stevie Ray Vaughan's, what the hell is the name of that song? That's where you see a man, my sweet little thing. That song is incredibly difficult to play. Like you have to be top of the chops to work through the entirety of that. But it seems just so effortless and gliding and stuff. And that's really what that gives to you. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry. This is something that is actually kind of hard for me to explain, but to wrap it all back in, it's part of some of the extremely potent adjustments to Western culture and the Western understanding of music and creation of music that the Black community has given to us, not potentially even willingly, and not in a way that they were compensated equitably or fully for, but that we still get to enjoy. And, there's a lot to be said about that. I think maybe even just to add on to that, there's this guy named Ben Shapiro, who is, if you know who he is, you're like, ugh. Or maybe you're not. But he was talking about, he's the kind of guy that tries to sideways denigrate Black culture in a way that's very palatable to his predominantly white audience. And he was talking about classical music. And if you know anything about classical music, you start getting to things like 12-tone equal temperament. And then if you get deeper, the changes from between like Baroque and classical, it's a huge tradition. But it's easy for somebody to say classical, and then you just kind of just start assuming things like Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, even though they're not all necessarily even in the same type of field in creation. Classical music is basically just, in the most broadest sense, symphonic Western music made with usually an orchestral setup or a symphonic setup, most often put together based on an understanding of 12-tone equal temperament spread out over an 88-key keyboard, tuned to C. And that this is me literally failing to dunk, but looking like I'm jumping very high. But he tries to denigrate this sort of stuff by saying it's simplistic. And his argument is that rap music, which is a tradition that is an evolution in itself of multiple different backgrounds, an incredible amount of traditions of many different cultures goes into creating songs that you understand as anything from Nicki Minaj's, "You a Stupid Hoe" to what's her fucking song that I love. If Sam is listening to this in the future, she's fucking screaming at me right now. But hold on, I'm gonna look it up. This is my fault because my brain is misfunctioning. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, Roman's Revenge, which is fire. Yes. So like and why those two things are of equivalent value, even though you look at it and you want to say, or someone like Ben Shapiro looks at it and he wants to say, oh, this one song, this is ignorant, and it's not trying to reach to the auspices of value. You know what I'm saying? It's not saying something that is profound. Is, for instance, and I think even Nicki Minaj would probably say this, as like dust I rise from Maya Angelou herself. So it's not a fair equivalency, because it's one of those things they're all part of the same tradition, and some part of that tradition is just fucking around. And honestly, it is as a song like Stupid Hoe, which is just absolutely ridiculous and very, very fun, and that's the point of it, is more part of the Western tradition than even Nicki Minaj's better song, Roman's Revenge. Because you can say that the historical underpinning of Stupid Hoe is a direct ancestral evolution of the song Lesch mich im Arsch by Amadeus Wolfgang motherfucking Mozart, which is a song that translates from the German to literally lick my asshole. And was a published song that he sang in public for fun. He constantly made dumb, shitty songs like that, and he was parroting things and being vulgar and efficacious and disgusting in a time when you think about all these lofted, arched columns and marble windows and gold gilding, which is what people think of when they think of classical music, but mostly because they don't know anything about it. And I don't think anybody that's listening to an exceptional amount of Ben Shapiro is really trying to understand the Western canon and tradition of music, which is a tradition of dozens upon dozens of different countries that fucking hated each other in Europe, as well as influences that are not even European on the music. You know, you have multitonal systems that come from people throughout the Ottoman Empire, what you would call Turkey nowadays, which is a heavy influence on music like System of a Down. System of a Down is Middle Eastern music. It's Middle Eastern death metal, basically, although it doesn't sound like it. Maybe not Middle Eastern, but Northern Mediterranean, highly Muslim area, Turkish death metal. It's multitonal music. It's the same thing with Pat, what's his name's, Miserlou. Miserlou is a Middle Eastern song, but it's a rock song, but it's based off a Middle Eastern tradition. That fucking wow. That fast-paced, high amount of 30-second note picking on strings, and all in that harmonic key. That is not an American tradition. That is American music benefiting from, you know, people that we don't give a fair shake to in America. You know, that's the Islamic conglomerates throughout the Middle East and up into Southern Europe. That's their music that people from that area brought here. And without Miserlou, you don't have Pulp Fiction looking cool as shit. And without people understanding that Samuel L. Jackson is the fucking man, you don't have Pulp Fiction looking cool as shit. It's a white dude that made it, Quentin Tarantino, and there's all kinds of unacceptable language in that film, but you don't get that, which you would say, I think a lot of people agree, that is the epitome of Western culture at that time. That's an arc point. You don't get that without Middle Eastern music and African American music and just African stuff in general. It's crazy, but that's what makes us great. And it's very approachable. And I think that's something that women and creators and Black Americans like Maya Angelou have given to this. They deconstructed the 12 tone equal temperament system that we have in Western music. You know, what you consider when you listen to bum 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 ba-da-dum, bum 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 ba-da-dum, bum 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 ba-da-bum bum ba-da-bum, and they took that and they just deconstructed it, and then you get you know, swing between notes and just riding ass fucking guitar solos. Incredible virtuoso finger picking skills throughout the entirety of the Mississippi River Delta, not to mention most of that spreading out area where we get Mississippi River Delta blues and stuff. Smashing guitars, obliterating them in a way that Spanish traditionalists who were playing a lot of that like flamenco type would be hearing and being like, I wish I could play that. How the hell did you just do that? Are you just riding with your thumb right there? And then, okay, so that's how they would have great conversations about that. And the point is that it's so difficult to make exceptional, high level, incredibly powerful and profound and dark topics like the ones that Maya Angelou brings up in this book so approachable. It's quite literally almost impossible. I know everybody listening to this to some degree, if you're in America, you might have been to a creative writing class in your life or had one of those moments in English class where you had people share and they were talking about extremely dark stuff in their life. That's what people want to talk about. You know, I hurt. It comes out. I hurt. And I feel, and you know, I'm being crushed. And Maya Angelou is doing those same stories. It's that teenage angst, that early 20s feeling lost with the much greater pain of post Civil War, antebellum, Reconstruction, anti-Black sentiment, Jim Crow, Southern racism on top of it, like a layer of grease, and still coming out of it. And you feel for her and you want more. When you're in one of those classes and you see people just, putting their guts out, it can be hard and hurtful. And people don't want to look at that. They want to look away. But with Maya Angelou, you want to understand, you want to feel, and that's because she's so fucking good at it. I really cannot hammer home how powerful her prose is, artist to artist. And she actually has an approach to writing that's very similar to the one that I've adopted as my own, which is kind of cool because when I started reading her, I was like, oh, she does rhythm the same. Or actually, really, I do rhythm the same way that Maya Angelou does rhythm, which is extremely specific type of thing to talk about. I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just nice to see that someone that's so well respected and incredible figured out, developed, and mastered a style that I'm kind of coming into my own in, or maybe not even necessarily a style, but an approach that I'm coming into my own in, and that I consider my own. It's great to find that you're walking into a room where the only company has been one of the most exceptional writers that have ever lived. But I think in my descriptions of this, hopefully I didn't lose everybody with my talking way too much about music, but I think that's the difference between, or really the value of someone like Maya Angelou versus somebody like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro being the guy that tries to be, his thing is like facts over feelings, facts over feelings. You shouldn't, I'm only saying it because it's true. That kind of stuff. While in one hand, he's trying to present you with the truth. On the other hand, he's trying to hold back the entirety of the culture. Because his thing is, I consider rap to be a de-evolution, I think is how he says it. Rap is a de-evolution of rock, which is a de-evolution of blues, which is a de-evolution of classical music. As in, i.e., all things that Black people have accomplished, they really only accomplished because of the inherent value of Western culture, which, despite the pain that they went through, is the only reason that they're successful, which is, until you've actually broken down that statement and seen how insidious it is, you don't understand the real shit that fucking Maya Angelou was talking about. They're trying to cut me out before I've even had my say by saying the things I say can't be of value because of who I am when I'm saying them. That's my sort of overarching piece. And I don't believe that. And I think now going into this stuff, and Juneteenth is coming up, and people are starting to get a little bit more woken up about how badly their neighbors have been treated. I think it's important to talk about stuff like that. And it's Maya Angelou. So, okay, so Still I Rise is my favorite poem from her. She's got a lot of good ones. But I'm going to end my conversation about why the caged bird sings. I'm going to read this to you guys. And then if you haven't read this book, and actually Why the Caged Bird Sings is its own poem too, I think. But I'm going to read this to you. And if this doesn't sell you on going out and checking Maya Angelou, I don't think anyone could. So this is Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides. Just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes? shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And so with that, I'm going to end my conversation on Maya Angelou and her exceptional work. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and I implore you to check out her stuff and really the great pool of Black authors who have lived in this country and even in other countries in England, throughout the world, who have created works no less impactful and no less powerful than their male or white or otherwise well-respected contemporaries, but have been ignored and shuffled to the sidelines because of systemic racism. Because people say, I don't think it's time for a Black author to be published, or I don't think it's a good waste of your college education being the first Black person from college to graduate and get accepted into this college in this area to pursue letters. You should do something more valuable with your time. Those unfortunate circumstances and the like are upsetting. And though I'm not going to talk about Maya Angelou, I do want to bring one thing up that I find odd, and I've never really mentioned before, and I don't know if people know about this, but please tell me in the comments if this has been a case, especially my listeners of color. This is a story. When I worked at a place called Media Play, which is a store that does not exist anywhere anymore. It was, think of a Best Buy that also had a Borders in it, and like a music store. It was weird. When you went into a Media Play, it was like there was a cross shape right in the middle of it, right? Big, gigantic, big box store, huge. The whole back left section was music. The whole back right section was books. The whole front right section was movies, and the whole front left section was video games, but generally computer shit. And then inside the cross in the middle was like all the stuff that was between those sections. So between the computer section and the video game or the movies was like TV screens and DVD players. Between the music section and the computer section was like CD players and stuff. And then, you can kind of get the feeling. Why I bring this up is I was a voracious reader when I was in school, and going here afforded me the opportunity to work in a bookstore, sort of. And I asked to work in the bookstore, and they put me in the fucking video section for reasons, but I would always go into the book section and try to keep up on stuff, and I would get this and that. It wasn't exceptionally large, but it was about the size of like a small Borders, which if you remember Borders books, so it had tons of stuff. If you can only guess, anyone that's in a bookstore can guess what our number one seller was. Our two number one sellers were. I'll give you a second. Cookbooks and fucking Bibles. And not Bibles, but non-Bibles. I don't even know how to describe these things. If you're not a religious person, might know what the hell I'm talking about, and people that work in bookstores will. Anyone else that's not a religious person won't understand what the fuck I'm talking about. But it's a Bible that's not a Bible. It is a Bible that is a like just all the shit that they don't want you to read about has been cut out and then replaced with how great the other sections are. But being the voracious young reader I was at the time, I wanted to read stuff from everybody, and get stuff. Like non-American stories were actually one of my first favorite things to read. Ironically enough, I don't know if it's really ironic, but when I was a kid, I liked Greek mythology, and Greece was not America. So in my mind, I liked stuff from other cultures, right? So I eventually got into reading like Japanese books that got translated into American, not any exceptional ones that you might know. I think the one I can remember that I read was called The Ido Road, which was good, if not oddly sexual in places, but very informative and interesting. And I don't even think it was actually probably by a Japanese person. But I always wanted to try to read stuff that was from not America. So for reasons, just because like I wanted to read all the cool stuff. And I was getting to a point in my early to mid teens. I got this job when I was like 16, 17 years old, that I was running out of good, basically white authors. And all the ones that I was reading, they all wrote the same fucking stories over and over again. And I never saw anything interesting. So, where this story is fucking finally going to go, is there was an African-American literature section in this bookstore that was not in the shelves. And I'll never forget this because it struck me as weird. But I was also really excited. So how this set up is if you went back into the book section, there was this weird little area that was like a lounge, like at a Borders or a Books A Million or anything, where you could kind of like sit down and hang out with a book for a second to see if you wanted to read it. So it was like 4 couches and like an ottoman or whatever. And on the other side of that was a tiny little mini aisle, and then the bookshelves, which were, I think they went 12 deep, like 1, 2, 3, a space that led to like the employee areas, and then all the rest of them and the walls and all of that. It started from nonfiction in the back, which was mostly like memoirs from rock gods and shit at the time, and then went up into religion. And then on the other side of that, actually at the border of the religion section and then the fiction sections, which were on my side of this as I'm describing it, closer to the lounge, were the fucking Left Behind books, if anyone remembers those, which is a kind of self-masturbatory, postmodern Christian attempt at writing a compelling post-apocalyptic novel in which the rapture happens and then, some sinners are left behind and they've got to survive in the lawless, godless wasteland while still somehow finding their way back to the good graces of Jesus Christ. I tried to pick up one of those once, and I remember I got a couple of pages into it, and I was like, not for me. But if it's for you, go ahead. You read whatever the fuck you want. Don't let me talk you out of it. The African-American section was a 2 by 2, like a 2 foot by 4 shelf standee thing, like made out of wood. And it was on the other side of the whole lounge, and it was alone. And it said big on top of it, African American literature. And I went to it. I was like, oh, this is fire. Like, black people have their own fucking books. I want to read black people books. Black people are fucking cool. Maybe they got some like neat shit I've never even heard of. All porno. To the fucking number, porno books. And I mean like the sleaziest, low rent, fuck novels you've ever read in my life or your life. I remember the backs of them were almost like, if I had to fucking read them out loud to you and you didn't know I was reading off of a back cover, you'd think I was being a fucking racist. Because it was like, like Janie's the new D girl at the studio. Though she's like thick and pretty and likes to dance, she doesn't know that J-Rock, the producer, is about to rock her world and blah, 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 blah. And then you open it and it would just be like chapter after chapter of fucking, which I don't knock that. We had a section for those books though. We had fuck books in media play, and you could go read the fuck books in the fuck book section. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, there are romance books and there's fuck books. And fuck books are just straight up porn. It's like literotica, but published somehow. Erotica is, I guess, what you call them, but not all the time. I feel like erotica is like a little bit more like softcore. Like, oh yeah, and then they kind of like made love and stuff. Fuck books are for dudes. Like, they have their own style to them. They have their own flow. I've read a bunch of them because they were everywhere on deployment. You've never seen guys get into literature. I remember one dude was talking to me one time on deployment. He's like, man, I always thought you read like way too much, but check this one out I just found. Like, it's just a fuck book. 300 pages of like dead ass setup and porno and then scene. There's no feeling about it. There's no character development. But that was all this African American literature section was. And I mean, there was no fucking James Baldwin, no Ernest Gaines hidden in there. You know what I mean? Just in case like the inquisitive mind wanted to find something that wasn't like somebody getting slammed out at a fucking rap studio. There was nothing. And at the time I was just like, whatever, because I'm me. So I don't know. I have my own reactions to stuff. And my reaction was, I don't think this is right. But I guess maybe the black people that want to buy books when they come here just want to buy porno books. Or maybe this is just a way to have porno books and not label it porno books. Like, that's as hard as 17-year-old me thought about that. But looking back with 2020 vision from the future, that is the most horrifying shit I think could have ever been put in the book section of a fucking bookstore, save like just for Nazis. What the, like, because when you think about it, if I think about it outside of myself, which is a thing that I did not learn how to do until I was in my mid-20s, really, 10 years almost after this. Imagine being me. Imagine being me, 12 years old, but I'm black and I love reading and I'm all about stuff, but I'm getting burned out on Stephen King and I want to see some other stuff. And I go into fucking media play and I'm like, oh, they have a fucking section that's just for me. This is where black people can get books about us. And then all I can find is like badly written smut. And they set that out for them. That was a curated list. We bought those books to fill that section. Motherfuckers would go in to catalogs and say, like, I want this to fill my African American literature section. It didn't just spring up. That's not a flower that grew on its own in a forest. That shit was fucking planted and watered and fucking fertilized into the goddamn thorn bush it became. And it blows my mind that I never even I never put the pieces together when I was a kid. I wasn't that smart of a child. But even then I was like, what the fuck? That's weird, right? So I guess my question is, did anybody else have like a problem or come across something like that when they were younger? I had completely forgotten about it until I went to a local bookstore that's here in Louisville, Carmichael's. Shout out Carmichael's if you're ever in the Louisville area and you're like, I need something to read, go to Carmichael's. It's locally owned. It's small, curated, intelligent. They have, sections and like areas for books from people of color, and like they'll have like standouts and settees and stuff where they're like, hey, this is our collection. If you want to read some great stories, I suggest this person and this person. She's new, she's not. He's a traditional, like everyone should read him. They have like that kind of stuff. And I was actually at a Carmichael's, and I was like, oh, they got an African American section here, and it was just like all stuff that you would expect, Maya Angelou, a lot of other names. I feel like an asshole because I can't just like rattle things off like that. I'm sorry. It's because I'm an ignorant motherfucker, not because those names aren't worth knowing. And then that story popped back into me, and I was like, holy shit. There was a African American section. It said African American literature. I'll never forget that at that fucking place. And if it had like a mix of stuff, it probably wouldn't have struck me as crazy, but it was all fuck books. And I guess that's my question. Does anybody else out there please respond? westsidefairytales@gmail.com. Hit me up on Facebook, Twitter. Did you ever come across that? Especially my listeners of color. Did you ever come across that? And when you did, or if you did, what was your reaction? Like, I don't even want to try to assume. I really want to know, because fuck. That wouldn't exist. That would get put up, and fucking 10 minutes later, everybody would be on Twitter just gassing the fuck out of that thing. But I leave the question to you. Please tell me. If this is on YouTube, comment on the YouTube. I desperately want to know. I need to know more about that shit. Actually, also, if you're a third degree removed, if you're a bookstore owner and you set one of those up, what was your intention? Why? Why did you do that? What was the overarching thought that you had when you set up that standee on the other side of the other books, on the other side of a fucking river of nothing, apart from all the general population? You created a fucking standalone fuck book ghetto. What were you thinking, and why? Please let me know in the comments down below. Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth is obviously a 2006 fantasy film. That's what they say on a lot of its basic descriptors. I consider Pan's Labyrinth to be a fantasy horror. I consider it to be really a horror film. And it's 2006, Guillermo del Toro. Really needs very little, if any, introduction, because it's both new and kind of a cultural touchstone. It's such a good film. I've never come across a single person that didn't like Pan's Labyrinth, to the point where if you don't, I'm just going to start this off. If you don't like Pan's Labyrinth, please hit me up and tell me why, because I need to know more about you. I want to know you as a person. I need to know why you think things, how you get to your conclusions, because that's fucking awesome. that you could dislike something like this. It's just you're a new sort of animal in my entire existence. But please hit me up. There's probably going to be somebody that's actually like from Spain that'll have extremely like well thought out and like culturally imperative reasons why this is an insufficient film, and I'll feel like an asshole. But actually, if you're that person, especially hit me up, because I always want to know more. I digress. I'm going to start off by just the interestingness of the title. Pan's Labyrinth is not the name of this movie most other places. The real title is El Labyrinth del Fauno, which is Spanish for the Labyrinth of the Faun, literally. And so they changed it to Pan's Labyrinth, which sounds great. And I can't think of the movie any other way, but despite how good it sounds and despite how well it's stuck, there is no Pan in this. As I was saying before, I'm a huge fan and study of Greek mythology. I think most of that stems from the fact that we had tons of Greek mythology books in my one-room library at the Catholic school where I went to school for the first 6 years until they decided they were fucking done with my ass. But we had tons of Greek mythology books, which are good and bad and, various. But they were not They were not kids' Greek mythology books, which it's like, a few pictures. And Hercules was so strong, he could lift a building. Do you know how much a building weighs? More than a car. More than 10 cars. Can you count to 10? None of that hand-holding shit. I was reading dead-ass fucking Greek mythology, which is fire. If you're ever going to get into horror and you want to get yourself a good base on how to write fucking shit that will really stick with people and scare them deeply, get into fucking Greek mythology, because it is just fucking rape and murder and cannibalism and child eating and sawing body parts off to make rivers and shit. It's the best. One of my favorite stories I can always remember from that is they were fighting this guy named Typhoon. So one of the Titans arose, and his name was Typhoon. And this has just kind of popped up as like one of the stories in this collection of stories. And I think it was Hercules and maybe like Zeus and Mercury had to get together and fucking gang up on this dude because he fucked up like 3 other gods. And when they beat him, they ripped his tendons out and made the first lyre. And like Mercury, who is a Hermes, wrote a fucking dope ass song about how bad they just fucked him up, that is death metal. That is the birth of death metal, that's always my shit. But I digress. Pan in Greek mythology, which exists obviously in Spain, they're closer to fucking Greece than I am. He's nothing like the faun in this. I don't really know too much about fauns or the Spanish understanding of what a faun is. Everybody has their own deviations and evolutions, especially on Greek myths, which became Roman myths, which became like the religion for a lot of people until Constantine decided he saw God in the sky and changed things for good. But the faun in this, I keep saying that because that's how he says it in my brain, the faun, but it's fauno. So I keep saying faun, so I'm sorry about that. But it's nothing. That creature is nothing like Pan. Pan is a satyr, human top, goat butt god, basically. I think he's like a lesser god, if I remember correctly, that works for Bacchus, who is the god of merrymaking and wine. And if there was ever a god I would follow Bacchus, because like when things go bad for different gods, it's always very like it's always, on brand. But whenever you go bad underneath Bacchus, you either drink yourself to death or you have a bacchanal. And his fucking, I can't remember what they're called, but Bacchus has a crew of ladies, I think they might be the Furies, who just get shit-faced in the woods and get naked and go and kill men. And if you piss off Bacchus, a bunch of naked, screaming, shit-faced women might fly out of the woods and just chop you to bits. That is so fucking awesome. Oh, what happened? Well, I was telling Jeremy he shouldn't be drinking on a Tuesday. It's not proper. He needs to get up for work. 6. Spend his life as a wage slave. Well, I told him off. And then all of a sudden you just hear, and he's, what's going on? And then just a bunch of fucking drunk ass women come out of the woods. Oh, Lord. Oh, they're going for my legs. That's like Pan in them. Very Greek. Very, very, very in that mythology. And so the decision to change El Labyrinth del Fauno, the Labyrinth of the Faun, to Pan's Labyrinth is an odd decision. It's one of those Hollywood things that actually threw me off when I started watching it, because I have such a wealth of knowledge of Greek mythology, because it was my passion when I was 8, that I was expecting fucking Pan to have a labyrinth in this, and it's not. So the actual title, The Labyrinth of the Faun, makes much more sense in the context, the greater context of the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a real labyrinth. They spend no time in the actual labyrinth, maybe a total of 3 minutes at the beginning and end of the film. And then they don't actually even go into it really. They like kind of like stand in the entrance, but they don't go into a labyrinth, a series of tunnels. Labyrinth also being extremely Greek. If you guys want a little history lesson real quick, Labyrinth was a bastardization of Labyrinth, right? Not even really a bastardization, but an evolution on that word. A Labyrinth is a double-sided axe that was the heraldic symbol / one of the things that everyone's really known for on the island of... Hold on. And do as Minos. The labyrinth of... Yeah, the island of Minos had the labyrinth, right? And so a labyrinthine thing was one of theirs. So they had this little two-headed axe, and they were warlike people. And so the expectation of where the word labyrinth came from, because labyrinth just means like labyrinth, like labir or labyrinth, and not necessarily really like a gigantic fucking maze. Like there's actually a word for that, I guess, in Greek. I'm trying to drag this out of my ancient Greek history course from back when I was in college, but it's very Greek. You know what I'm saying? The irony is that there is a sort of stylized labyrinth on the picture of the Pan's Labyrinth poster. Has a very similar to the shape of the curved top crescent labyrinth. And I don't know, that's just a thing that I thought was interesting, but that's also very, 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 very Greek. About as Greek as you can get. It's not even really that translated from what I understand. It's like almost how you would say the word there. I could be completely wrong. If you're a Greek person or a professional in Greek history, please correct me. Westside Fairytales@gmail.com. Hit me on Twitter, hit me on Facebook, and tell me how stupid I am. I'm fine with it. But that's kind of all I'll say about that. But it's the labyrinth of the faun is a much more metaphorical thing. And so we get into like the plot and stuff. So there is the Princess Moana, who were suspected should be actually Princess Ophelia, and Ophelia is our main character. Then we have the antagonist, Captain Vidal, and her mother. They're all going to a little place in the woods where Captain Vidal is basically rooting out rebels. He's a Francoist captain, and he's an asshole. There's a deuteragonist in the form of Mercedes, who is wonderful. She's like one of my favorite characters ever. And they all interact and stuff. I won't get too into the plot. It's go and read it. But I've been asked a few questions specifically that I'll just get into and address it. There's a lot of themes in this, and like I said, I call it a horror movie. About half of the plot really is not anything to do with the labyrinth, Pan's Labyrinth at all, but rather the overarching plot of Vidal rooting out and fighting against these rebels in Spain. I found out later from a fan that told me, because I cannot know everything about world history, but I will add stuff if you tell me anything interesting. In 1944, Francoist Spain, the bad guys won in that, and actually Spain is still a fascist, semi-fascist nation, or at least was for a very long time after that, and still has fascistic tendencies, which makes a lot of sense because I've heard how much influence the Catholic Church has there to this day, and it's never good. You do not want the Catholic Church to be making decision one for fucking anybody. I say that as a confirmed Catholic and now lapsed and permanently atheist former Catholic. Do not ever let them make fucking decisions for you. But they did. So one of the things that was brought up is, as this is kind of partly a war story, does the horrors of war play into it in its horror classification in my mind? And I would say very much yes. Because this is very horrifying, and not in the traditional like war is hell way, where you talk about if you're talking about a movie like the classic Full Metal Jacket, which I had to really fucking work my brain to get a hold of there. Full Metal Jacket is all of the horrors of war are there. You go to Platoon, another classic from the time. Really a classic from that sort of genre of, maybe America's not the good guy here. Or maybe there really can't be good guys in war. When you get into those things, they're not, they have, they're horrific, and it's just, we're playing on the word a little bit too much, but it's not horror. In those cases, it's a very blunt, almost especially with help me out here. Full Metal Jacket, it's extremely blunt, almost journalistic. With Platoon, it's, I would say, operatic, really. You have grandiose spectacle and large body motions, really. And behind that wonderful soundtrack, the Adagio by somebody's Adagio. No, I'm singing. God damn it. I almost just started singing fucking Un Nessun Dorma. I can't sing it because it's a fucking Adagio anyway. It's going to take me 30 fucking seconds to get through the first 8 notes. But it's very operatic, and I would say it's a completely different type of story. The closest you would get for horror in war as a war movie in these American iterations would definitely be Apocalypse Now, which isn't that hard to say. Although I would say that's very much in the Greek tragedy style of writing. It's functionally speaking analogous to The Odyssey and, of course, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Those are all easy references for me to make because I've talked about them in Horror and Lit Club literally a year ago when I was talking about Toda Americana. It's actually kind of nice to think back. It's been a year and we're coming back to the same kind of conversation points, but still not very horror. In the case of Pan's Labyrinth, Captain Vidal is basically like a fucking slasher. Like, really. His violence is omnipresent even when he's not doing it. You understand him as a dangerous figure, and working around him and staying outside of his clutches is how you survive. He's very much a single-minded, direct, and purposeful killer. He is part of the grand tradition of Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, which, he's got whatever his backstory is that he has. On his face, he's just a murderer. You don't really see much deeper than his skin, and when you do, you find that it's just more of the same. And there's more conversation I'm going to have about that later because of another thing somebody brought up. But yeah, that is very much horror in the horrors of war thing, is because I knew guys like that. I still know guys like that who are like that and were like that in the military. And if they would have been let off the fucking leash the way that Captain Vidal was, or given orders really that would have allowed them or like him in the case of the show to just do shit like that, there would have been no hesitation, no remorse, no second guessing. They would have just fucking done that sort of shit. And I can't say that I'm particularly immune to criticisms in that too. I was in the military, and it's a hell of a thing to have a lot of power and a gun and, the authority to use it. It's an extremely, extremely large amount of responsibility that I think most people shouldn't have. And I will go to my grave believing should not be foisted onto the shoulders of men that can not even legally drink yet. I always thought about that argument when I was in school. I'll get back to what I was talking about. But after I got out of the Marine Corps, I thought a lot about the argument that I gave all the time. Like, man, I can't fucking drink, but I can go shoot people. And, that is very much a case where the inverse is true of the converse. like, or I don't know how to say that. I might have said that right. It's a logical expression, but basically if something's true in one direction, it has to be true in the other direction. Otherwise it's not actually true. And there's something that's fundamentally wrong with it. And yeah, you are allowed to go kill people and you aren't allowed to drink. And that does not mean that you should be allowed to drink. I don't think that kids that are, I think that kids that are under 21 should be strongly dissuaded from drinking alcohol. They still drink. I don't live under a fucking rock. Like, I know you can go get shit-faced at 18. I didn't get shit-faced at 14. And all of that is available to you. And I don't really see reasons for it to be legal or illegal in either direction, because I don't think it's really going to change the result. Kids are going to get shit-faced drunk. If anything, honestly, yeah, the drinking age should probably go down. But that does not mean that at 18 you should be allowed to go out and fucking kill people. It's something that should be such a fucking emergency measures only that it never happens. Like, you should be fucking horrified that a 25-year-old has a gun. I was 25. I was 19, combat fucking veteran, feeling like super confident. And then I kind of realized like later on that was kind of just unique to me and being in the Marine Corps. You know, I ran into a lot of guys that were in the fucking National Guard, the Air Force, Jesus Christ. And honestly, a lot of people that are in the Army. And I'm like, what in the fuck? How the fuck are you armed? You could barely fucking make your bed and wear your uniform and they gave you a fucking gun? Like, what the fuck? You know, I'm not knocking you. If you're in the Army, well, I'm kind of knocking you. You know what I mean? Dude, I'm a Marine Corps grunt. You know where I stand. But I'm not necessarily knocking your service. But just like the thought, if you don't know this as a civilian, people listening to this, the amount of people that are armed infantrymen in the Army is fucking massive compared to the amount of people that are armed infantrymen in the Marine Corps. It's I think to almost 10 times or something like that. Like, the Marine Corps only has like 250,000 people in it or something like that. I can't remember the real number, but of that, only 17% are grunts. And that means that you're an infantryman, which, you know, you're actually going to have a rifle and go out and be a guy with a gun around people. And, you know, some of the other people detached too, and they're out there. But to be that Marine infantryman, you have to go through a fucking full, really just like a full 6-7 months of like basic training. But then you're constantly training after that. Your job every fucking day is you wake up, you fucking get screamed at by people that are in their late 20s. And then, you know, you run and you do drills and you go to fucking ranges and you shoot and you shoot and you shoot targets constantly. You know what I mean? And I mean, that's like constantly for us, which is still only like once or twice a month. But you shoot moving targets and you shoot non-moving targets and you shoot targets while you're moving and you shoot targets from buildings and all this shit and vehicles. And even at the end of all that, you're still not that fucking good compared to like a Navy SEAL who does all that shit, but somehow fucking more. And like their basic training is 2 fucking years. So they're really competent. Then you take like all of that you have to do to be a Marine infantryman and like strip all of it away to like it's 2 days of fucking 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. And that's the National Guard. And then they just get to carry those same rifles that Marines use to fight fucking terror in the Middle East and shit, you know, and you can feel however you want about those conflicts. I'm not really necessarily getting into that, but you could point those fucking guns at civilians. You're out of your fucking mind. Like, it's such a recipe for disaster. If I looked at myself when I was 19, I would still just be like, man, I don't know. I'm still not 100% on you. I looked at myself when I was 22 at the end of all my deployments, and I would be like a lot more convinced because I'd be like, this guy doesn't want to fucking shoot anybody anymore. Go to Iraq 3 times on combat deployments and start talking to Iraqis and shit, and eventually you'll be like, I don't know what the fuck will fix this problem in the Middle East, but it's not me being here. This has accomplished nothing. But I digress. I ran into a lot of fucking people that were real sketch when I was over there. I think that's where I was going with that gigantic diversion. But a guy like Captain Vidal, that's one of the questions that people brought up to me. One of the guys was that his concern with the movie was that Captain Vidal was not given any positive attributes, which kept him from being a fully fleshed out character. And that's a weird thing to approach because, in my opinion, I know a lot of Captain Vidals that were in the Marine Corps that weren't necessarily captains, but they were, maybe one or two of them were captains, but lieutenants and lance corporals and sergeants and gunnies and what have you. And I think he has a lot of positive attributes if you isolate him as a character away from the incidents of the show. He's punctual. He's well dressed, which means a lot in the military. His uniform is impeccable. He shaves. He gets up every day and makes sure that he is physically prepared for the events of the day. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot to be said. It might not mean anything to civilians, but if you see a guy that's in the military and they get up and their uniform looks like shit, like you gotta fucking watch out for that guy. Because if he's fucking up getting dressed in the very specific and dedicated way, but it's still, if he's fucking up getting dressed, what the fuck else is he fucking up? That's the military look on it. So he's crisp. He's on point. He's a family man after a fashion. He's dedicated to his beliefs. He follows orders without question. He is dedicated to finishing out those orders to the letter. He does not skimp on his duty. He does not show unnecessary mercy to people. He does whatever it takes to get his job done. These are all positive attributes. They're not good human attributes, but there are people that are in the military right now and throughout every conflict who just forget their humanity. They hang it and put it on a shelf. You know what I mean? If you took him actually out of his uniform and out of his roles and responsibilities as a captain, he might actually be a completely different person. And you'll never know in this story because that's not what's required of his character. If you think about it, really, when you watch this film, he's never out of uniform. Even when he's down dressed, like he's not wearing a shirt or something, he's still in uniform. He's still a captain. He's still surrounded by his men. If you really pay attention. He basically never lets them see him out of uniform to any significant degree. Even when he's injured, he applies his first aid to himself without the assistance of his men because he doesn't want to seem like a weak person. He's an ideal soldier. And that's really why he's such an effective character because, the story is not about him. He's an antagonist. You know what I mean? And as an antagonist, he's perfect. And it's kind of hard to describe this. You want antagonists sometimes, who have these human character traits so that you can see more about them and you can understand more of like why they are doing this evil thing that they're doing and, what's the more exceptional version of it. But sometimes a fascist is just a fascist. The thing about that is all of what he's doing, we understand as people living in predominantly Western societies, as English speakers, a lot of the people that I'm talking to on this podcast right now, we understand that what he's doing is evil. He doesn't think of it that way. And not because he's an irrational monster or some sort of beast. He understands his goals and who he represents when he puts on his uniform as being for the betterment of Spain. He's not killing most of these people really because he wants to kill them. He wants to kill them because that's his job. You know what I'm saying? But he's not an absolute freak show sadist, despite the fact that he tortures people and all of that stuff. He's not, a sneering, hand-wringing, blood-licking fucking nightmare. He's force an extension of an illegitimate, well, maybe a legitimate, but an awful civil rights abusing government. He's a fascist. And that's really what fascists are. The fascist methodology, their beliefs is to absolve the individual of their need for or desire for or ability to have individuality in order to prop up the betterment or in order to prop up the state for their betterment. An absolute absolution of self in order to increase the productivity of the nation, in order to put the family unit first. The worst thing to any fascist government is the individual and the allure of individuality. You can see that in a lot of Nazi propaganda. Nazis never say, you, the individual German, can help. They say, a German helps. So there is never an individual German. There is just the German ideal, the Nazi ideal. And what is the Nazi ideal? It is a sharp-chinned, healthy young man with Aryan features and a desire to help the nation, who believes in Christ, but understands the importance of putting the Führer first, and above all else, of joining the German family unit and finding a wife and producing more perfect German babies for this whole thing. And you can see that once I'm saying all this, I believe if you see that, you can understand better Vidal. Vidal has absolved himself of individuality in order to become this, in his mind, probably more perfect being. He exists to serve the Falangist and Francoist Spain. And I think in that case, which is rare, normally I like a villain that has his own motives and stuff. But the case of this is the villain really is Francoist Spain. And I think if I talked to Guillermo del Toro about it, I think he would probably agree with my interpretation of this. I couldn't see it being looked at in too many other different lights and still making a lot of sense. But I think in this specific case, that makes a lot of sense, and it makes Vidal a good character, especially considering the overarching things that motives and morals and whatnot that Guillermo del Toro wanted to put forward. For instance, I talked about this in the review that I did on YouTube, but the Pale Man is a representation of the Catholic Church. He is a child-eating beast that ignores the ostentatiousness and of the room around him and the meals set before him in order to do the most simplest and base pleasure of his existence, which is to eat children who are often lured to him with the promise of food and wealth and warmth, as evidenced by the greater space around him in which he has been ensconced by somebody because he could not build those things for himself. He is a sick and unhealthy and disgusting creature who, with his frail arms and legs, can only kill small things like fairies and children. You could tell a grown man would probably be able to beat the fucking Pale Man to death easily, even if you're not a particularly physically adept creature or a person, because it's such a gross and withered creature. Things like that are really what Guillermo del Toro is trying to put forward. And also, this goes more into the understanding that Pan's Labyrinth is a fairy tale. And so using more archetypal and motive-driven characters to tell the moral tale is just as important. I think a lot of what you want, or what this person wants from Vidal but can't get, you do get from Mercedes, the deuteragonist, who is, like Vidal, a fighter, a killer. But with her, you have a much more divided up and subtle character development. She comes from a lot of different places to go into one. Again, I said this in the review. If you want to check out my review of Pan's Labyrinth, you should. It's on YouTube, youtube.com/Westside Fairytales. Throw me a sub, actually, if you like these discussions. I'm going to be doing stuff more like that on YouTube, just to try to get more followers. But with Mercedes, she has this knife, right, that she keeps in her apron. She's always folding it up, and it's a very simple knife. It's not a combat knife. It's a wooden handled, well-made, but short-barreled, stubby kitchen knife. I would say it's almost like a woodsman's knife or a boat knife, if you know what those things are, which are much more for utility than they are for any specific action. Combat knives are usually channeled, and they usually have like little serrations on them and stuff because they are meant for cutting flesh and being pulled in and out of blood and bones and not getting stuck. Hunting knives are made for sometimes even the specific thing that you're hunting, but they'll have gut hooks on them and stuff, and they'll be curved and serrated in their own way for hacking through bone and flesh and ligaments and whatever else you need to cut through. A kitchen knife is long. The typical chef knife that's been in practice for everyone forever is long and curved so that you can use it as a levered, or you can use it in a levered way so that you can speed up the way that you're cutting. Knives have purpose to them, which is something for any aspiring writers or creators. This is a very important lesson to learn, is that everything has a purpose to it, even if you don't know it, but especially tools. I feel like there's a lot of disconnect when I'm going on this rant. I feel like there's a lot of disconnect in modern writing these days because people don't understand the value of a tool because they don't get their hands on them. Like you'll see hammers and stuff. Actually, a very good explanation is from Monstro. Season 2 of Monstro, we were talking about sound effects. And there was the sound effect was somebody's limb was being cut with an electric knife. Electric knives buzz because it's a reciprocating cutting action off of a flat blade, a flat-edged, serrated blade. So it reciprocates, it goes back and forth, which creates a buzzing noise. What he used was a chop saw, which goes, it's a rotary blade. And actually the chop saw was very clearly cutting wood. I would say, if I had to guess based on the time and the timbre of the cut, it was shredding a 2x4, which I know because I work in that. And it sounds small, but you got to understand the tools have purposes. And if you use the wrong tool to describe a purpose, people, especially people that know what you're talking about, are going to go, what the fuck? A more easy example would be if you saw a cop pull out a Desert Eagle 5.0 in a 1930s detective thriller. You'd be like, well, it's strange that he's not using a 38 police special or any variant therein. Also, it's especially odd that he's using a gas piston fired or fucking recoil operated pistol that wasn't made by the Israelis until the 1970s something. Strange. If you're a carpenter and you see somebody, trying to do framing with a ball peen hammer, you're going to be like, what? Why are you doing that? You should be using like a claw hammer. There's things to imply off of that afterwards. Why? These questions will arise. Why are you using a metal shaping hammer to do wood? Do you not have a better hammer? Is it this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or is he unfortunately getting forced to finish a job with the wrong tool? That's how important tools can be. And in Mercedes' case, you can see that her tool is a very bland, very common sort of knife, and she could do most anything with it, but it doesn't have a real purpose, and that belies her own internal relationship with violence. The knife is her violence in the world. That's what it's a representative artifact. So most of the time you see her taking it out and she cuts potatoes with it. She does all these basic, banal, domestic things that are sort of expected of her. Her cover is that she's like a sort of kitchen woman, servant-y type lady. And it's these banal, everyday things that you would do with a knife if you had a knife. And it's a non-specialized knife, just like her kind of violence is non-specialized. Later on, she uses it to attack Captain Vidal, pulling it from the same place and using it the same way and then putting it back. Because That's her relationship with violence. It's a thing of necessity that she carries with her and keeps hidden and takes out for certain necessary circumstances. But you can also tell, because it's not a specialized sort of thing, that her approach to violence is not specialized. It's not something that she wants to be doing. It's not something that she necessarily even enjoys doing. It's something like cutting potatoes that must be done in order to serve the greater good. In order to cook the soup of freedom, she has to cut up the potato of Vidal's face, which is going a bit far, but you can see reflected in what Vidal does is that he takes banal things, normal things, everyday tools, and sets them to the specific purpose only ever of hurting people. You know, he uses fairly common carpentry tools and stuff. I can't remember everything that's in his tool bag, but it all looks like basic engineering stuff. It probably has analogs to modern tools because this is back in the 40s that I don't recognize, but it looks like stuff that you use for metal shaping. Crimps and shears and benders, things like that. I don't know the specific names for them, but anybody that's in machine work would probably be able to look at most of those things and be like, yeah, that's what that's for. It would fucking hurt a finger, but actually that's not even what I would use it for. It's probably what they'd start saying in their head. But that's the difference between them. And I think it's very well done. And as a long form answer to that question, that is why I believe that Vidal is actually a very good character and very well done, is because he fits within that. And I also, given how layered and thick and well constructed Guillermo del Toro's universes are, especially in consideration of Pan's Labyrinth, which I think is pretty much his masterwork, excluding possibly Hellboy 2, that I don't think any of those things were a mistake. I think he has Vidal being very much down to the last stitch in his fucking shirt. He is very much as the character he wants to be. And you know, that might be an excuse. It's the easy excuse to make for any creator, is to say, you know, he did everything else so well, I don't see why he would make this mistake. But I'm going to stand behind my statement on that one. And, you know, we've been talking for almost 2 hours. This was supposed to come out probably about an hour ago. My air conditioning has been off in my house. Thankfully, this is the evening, so I don't have to worry about the house overheating, but my dog might be. I don't think he is. He's sniffling at the door. So I'm going to be ending this. Thank you all for sitting through this. Understand, especially in conjunction with everything that I say, that I am not a perfect person. I'm very frequently ignorant of things. I am wrong. I am incorrect. Please don't hesitate to provide a correction if you think one is warranted, or if you think one even might be warranted. Always reach out to me if you want a clarification. Always reach out to me if you want to clarify. If you are interested in learning more about any of these things, hit me up and I will at best provide you with resources with which you can enrich yourself. You know what I'm saying? Any people out here, if I misspoke or anything regarding, the civil rights movement and the Black Lives Matter things, I'm a white dude. This is all my white dude interpretation of shit. You know what I mean? It's not fully fledged. It comes from a place of ignorance coming up. You know, I got those same shit ass fucking history books that everyone did. And I'm glad sometimes I didn't pay that much attention in history class because I didn't get all of the wrong information. And I read enough that I had a pretty broad understanding of things, and still it was not broad enough. So I will say this: if you're another white person like me, don't take my opinions and translations and interpretations of Black culture and especially these recent civil rights movements, or surges in the civil rights movement, as an end all, as a be all, or in any case even a more than just partially formed and understood chunk of information. You know what I mean? Go out, listen to Black people. They actually know what the fuck they're talking about, is really what I'm trying to say. So get out there, man. You can spend 20, 30 minutes on Twitter and start getting pushed in the direction. Don't use Twitter to gain your understanding. Get on Twitter find people that sound like they make sense and then go and look at what they have to say in other areas. Benjamin Dixon's an interesting person to listen to talk about these things. Start there. And with that and all my fucking telling you how dumb I am, I think I'm going to end it. Please tune in 2 weeks, I think it is, maybe 3, first Friday of July for the last story of our 4th fucking season, man. Our 4th season of the Westside Fairytales is coming to an end with my story, The Carrier. Hopefully it's a good out. It's definitely longer than I remember writing it. It's going to be, we're going to be going out on another hour and a half, 2 hour long episode. Tune into that and you are going to be able to hear at least the theme song for next season, which is going to be its own gigantic, encased, super long story that I think a lot of you are going to enjoy. And I think a lot of you are going to say, hey, I wish it was only single stories, but I'm also getting so much fucking content that I don't feel like I should be complaining. But yet I am. If I can, I'm going to try to get some of that together and maybe even have a preview of next season, a chunk of one of the chapters for you available at the end of that next episode. If not, look forward to somewhere in the middle of the summer. I'm going to come back and talk to everybody, and then we'll probably have something available then, hopefully. And yeah, if you enjoyed this, please like, rate, subscribe on YouTube. Send us a review on Apple Podcasts, put it on CastBox, share this with people. That really helps immensely. Put it on Reddit, put it in Facebook groups, put it out there as much as you can. And I really can't thank you enough. If you want to support this show, you can stop by our website and donate to us via PayPal. Give us $1 if you think it's worth $1. Give us 10 cents if you think it's worth 10 cents. It's always going to be free because above all, I think I have something worth saying, and I don't think that you should have something worth saying behind a paywall that poor people can't get through. And I know a lot of you guys are working your asses off, and even our few patrons that we have on Patreon, you know, they're making this show come together and they're giving what they can. And I can't thank them enough for that. If you want to join that, patreon.com/Westside Fairytales. Give us $5. You get everything that we put out early. And you also get access to behind the story episodes where I ramble like this and talk at length about the stories and what inspired me to write them. You also get digital ebooks of the episodes, which is going to continue even until next season. So next season, you'd be able to get a digital ebook of the eventual full novel version of season 5, which is going to be released probably on Amazon or something. So keep up with that. If you just want to get like a shirt or some stickers and a pin or a bookmark, hit us up, westsidefairytales.com/merch. We've got all kinds of shirts and mugs and all sorts of stuff on sale. Once we get the last bit of art from Yui for this season, we're actually going to be putting together a season 4 art collage item, I guess you'd say, that'll be coming out. So there'll be some season 4 themed gear that's going to be coming out soon. So check that out as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. Thanks for hanging out with me. I know this was a long one. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that I didn't ramble too much and that I didn't put my foot in my mouth. But you know, hey, hope in one hand and shit in the other, and see which one fills up first. Until next time, as always, stay safe out there.